The Nintendo Switch is truly an incredible console. It really revolutionized the gaming industry by being a hybrid console that you can play on the go or at home. It recently just surpassed the Wii as being Nintendo's best-selling console, currently selling over 110 million units, and it has one of the most satisfying sound effects I've ever heard from a console. Oh yeah, I can listen to that sound all day. So with that being said, the next logical question is, when is the Switch 2 coming out? Or is that even a logical question? Perhaps a better question to ask is, should Nintendo make a sequel to the Switch or a whole new console entirely? Well, in this video, I want to explore that idea. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Froyo, and in this channel, we make funny and thought-provoking videos about Nintendo games with a dash of cool editing. I am not delusional, and what I think is going to happen is that Nintendo is going to make a sequel to the Switch. The Switch is far too successful, and it would be foolish not to capitalize on this incredible success. But if Nintendo shifted their focus when making consoles and prioritized gaming rather than a cool gimmick for a console, I believe that they could be seen as a real contender to PlayStation and Xbox. Well, let's be honest, no one plays Xbox, so Xbox doesn't count. So what Nintendo should do is make a really powerful console, and that console will be a real contender to the console wars. And that's it. Alright guys, see you next time. Oh wait, you expected more? Well, I guess I can make this video longer than a minute, so here goes. I'll start by asking you a question. If you can credit one thing as to why the Super Nintendo has one of the best gaming libraries of all time, what would you think that reason would be? The fact that it's a sequel to an already existing successful console? Maybe because Nintendo was already a trusted brand and people wanted to see more from them. Or maybe the fact that it has Super in its name. These are all valid reasons as to why the Super Nintendo was successful. But in my opinion, it comes down to the games. But more importantly, the console it's on. Because the only reason to make a new console back in the day was to be able to create more powerful games. That was the only real reason the Super Nintendo was made back in the day. And it was to make the best games possible for that console and make the occasional shitty advertisement and shitty rap to go along with it.
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty...
And for that reason, the Super Nintendo had one of the best libraries in gaming. Fast forward to a few years and Nintendo 64 comes out, and this is when Nintendo was starting to mess up at this point. Well, every company was switching to CD-ROMs because not only was it cheaper, but also had a lot more memory compared to cartridges. The only real advantage cartridges had over CDs was the fact that they were more durable and they didn't experience as much load time. But it was obvious to see the direction of the gaming industry was going, and that was CD-ROMs. So as I said before, despite CD-ROMs being better than cartridges in every way, Nintendo still chose cartridges. And there is one thing we know about Nintendo is that they are stubborn as hell, and they of course stuck with cartridges. And this is what I like to call the beginning of the gimmick consoles. You see, after the N64, I felt that Nintendo felt like they had to be different from the competition. And although that isn't necessarily a bad thing, Nintendo took it overboard. Now, the N64 and the GameCube wasn't too bad when it came to prioritizing games over the console, but that all changed when the Wii came out. The Wii really revolutionized the gaming industry when it came out, and it makes sense that its codename was Revolution, because that's exactly what it did. It was the best-selling console of its time, for Nintendo consoles of course. It even inspired Sony and Xbox to make their own motion-based console add-on in the form of PlayStation Move, and for Xbox it was the Kinect. But as hard and as powerful as the Wii shined, it burned out just as quickly. The amazing thing about the Wii was it was easy to learn and its gameplay was very engaging. Most games only had you use 2 to 3 buttons to play, and the rest of the controls was motion based. And some games had it that you had the duality to either play with the buttons or the motions. For example, with Wii Tennis, you could serve the ball by pressing A, or you could serve the ball by actually doing the motion of serving a ball with the Wii remote. But the cons of the Wii is what made it so popular in the first place, and that's its simplicity. Most people had a lot of fun when they played the Wii for the first week or so, but the average casual gamer moved on. And because the Wii wasn't only hard to develop, but its processing power was comparable to the GameCube, meaning this next gen console, of course at its time, was only able to run games just as powerful as the last gen console. But despite that, Nintendo was still able to make really amazing games and just to put out absolute bangers, as they usually do. But even that wasn't enough to save the console. Although the Wii was one of the best selling consoles of all time, no one took it seriously as a hardcore console. When people talked about console wars, Wii was never part of the convo, only PlayStation 3 and Xbox. And the last time I've checked, I never heard anyone say that the Wii was their favorite console among the big three. Even the Nintendo fans knew better. And if you're that one guy that prefers the Wii over the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, all I got to say is that is some crazy riding. You may want to hop off and give your legs a rest, it must be sore. But anyway, and naturally the Wii had a very slow and painful death. And Nintendo always had the stamp as a company that made games for kids, but the Wii solidified that legacy, which isn't exactly the worst thing. But anyways, we now get to the Wii U. Oh, the Wii U. This game was the epitome of a gimmick console. It wasn't as bad as the Wii with the whole console being around a gimmick. Nah, scratch that. It was just as bad as the Wii, but in different ways. The good thing about the Wii U is that it seemed like it had a bigger focus on hardcore gamers than Wii. It's nice to actually hold a controller that has more than 5 buttons on it, even if there's a huge ass screen in the middle of the controller. But the Wii U was underpowered and it lacked diversity of games, and it also looked ugly as hell with a gaming controller that looked like an iPad with buttons. But I got to say, it was surprisingly comfortable as a controller too. But as you could always predict, that console failed miserably. But with all that being said, with the Wii U, one thing about Nintendo that I do respect is the fact that they are willing to take risks, even if it might potentially hurt them. For example, when Nintendo released the Virtual Boy, their purpose for that console was to have a console that gave a 3D experience. Even though that failed miserably, the Virtual Boy set up the framework for the 3DS. It was able to offer 3D in a more convenient and entertaining way. Even though most people played with the 3D off, as myself, it was able to build on what the Virtual Boy did. Similarly to the Virtual Boy, the Wii U was a building block for the Nintendo Switch, by now allowing people to play with their console portably, and that was absolutely amazing innovation. But as amazing as the Switch is, can we just think for a moment? Can you imagine a Pokemon game where there was no graphical limit holding the console back? Or a Pokemon game where all the Pokemon are available? Crazy to think that's a controversial statement nowadays. Or Breath of the Wild, how big that map might be, or the depth of the game could be if the Switch wasn't holding it back. It's unfortunate to think that some of the craziest ideas for our favorite Nintendo IPs are being held back due to how weak the Switch is. Why I mentioned the Super Nintendo earlier in this video, because the Super Nintendo is a great example of what Nintendo will look like if they just focus on the games. Because it was a simpler time, and the purpose of the console was simply to play the games. The only reason why the Super Nintendo existed was to be able to play more powerful games than the NES. So because of that, we have one of the best gaming libraries of any console, because Nintendo was just focused on nothing else but trying to make the best games possible. And I would argue it is one of the best consoles for that reason. When you look at consoles like the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, it's hard not to get jealous and to see the capacity games and graphics could be created if you create a very powerful console. I feel like the Switch is wearing weighted shin guards similar to Rock Lee, and we all know how much the games would be if they took off those damn shin guards. But not only do they refuse to take those damn shin guards off, but it seems like they add more weight to it. Yes, I'm looking at you, NSO. Long story short, Nintendo just needs to prioritize gaming rather than gimmicks. It's cool if a console has a few cool features here and there, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a gaming console, and I bought it to play games, not for some weird gimmicks. So please, Nintendo, switch it up. Pun intended!